What's in a question? Maybe just about everything important. A smart and sharp question should strike up a more engaging conversation. So let's have ourselves a little discussion on the digital gap. We're joined by Diane for a discussion. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Doing just fine. How are you doing this Monday?
I'm doing pretty good.
Great. I'm so glad to have you back.
Are you freezing in here?
A little bit. It's really cold in the studio. It's really hot outside.
Yeah.
Our bodies are confused. Everyone stay safe.
Right.
I can't highlight that enough. Apparently, the weather conditions are tricky. We'll have the updates you in just a moment. But in the meantime, let's get to our question unboxing topic of the day. What was our question again?
All right, so question, are you tech savvy enough? What about you? Are you a tech savvy person, Lena?
No. It's funny because I like how you throw in the enough there. Are you tech savvy enough to survive in this fast changing environment? And my answer is no. And
No.
I guess if you divided our society into the young and the old, I think I classify for the former. However, I'm barely keeping up, Diane. Barely.
Yeah, if you see Lena's doing like computer works.
Hey, don't.
Never mind. I won't go there. So another way to put today's question would be, are we entering the era of no country for old men?
No way.
I mean, in this day and age, older adults as a group are on the negative side of this so-called digital divide, which not only identifies who uses the internet and who does not, but also the gradation of digital exclusion, which is the complexity, depth, and variety of internet use.
Sure.
Lower use rates of computers and the internet among older adults have important social and cost ramifications, of course. And as the internet becomes more integrated into the everyday life, people who do not use the internet are more likely to become more disenfranchised and more disadvantaged.
Think about how much information is available for us online. I mean, you talk about banking, you talk about interactions, how you take in context, how you talk about current events even. So if you don't understand the lay of the land, you're absolutely getting left behind.
Right. I mean, think about like what if you're trying to get like documents from online, you need all those sorts of like identification and banking accounts.
And
it gets really complicated.
It changes quite frequently in the name of security, but the consequences of that is it's increasingly difficult to keep up. And even for me, the young generation, I hate the process.
It's really difficult.
It's like limbo.
Right.
Now, there's a recent study that shows that there's a certain demographic that especially lacks their accessibility to the digital information. You can imagine who, right?
Right. So according to Gallup Korea, more than 30% of women in their 70s or older do not use smartphones at all.
Is that right?
So this is something we need to think about because the usage rate is 10 times lower than men in the same age bracket.
Oh, that's a pretty staggering report if you talk about the discrepancy, right? So it's not just about age, it's also about gender in that case. Men 70s or older technically utilize the internet and smartphones much better than women in their 70s. So when considering how most South Koreans are hooked on their smartphones, this is a really low number.
Right. So according to the survey results, 97% of total respondents said they use a smartphone.
Okay.
The rate of smartphone usage increased by 2 percentage points compared to the survey in June last year. The penetration rate of smartphones among the elderly has also exceeded 90% as well. Both men and women in their 60s accounted for 98% of smartphone use. 97% of men over 70 also use smartphones. However, as I mentioned before, among female respondents in their 70s or older, only 69% of the respondents were smartphone users, which is 30% percentage point difference, which is very huge.
Okay, so we know where the discrepancy lies, and maybe that makes it easier for us to target which age group, which gender demographic, right?
Exactly.
Now, I'm sure they had a difficult time, especially during the pandemic, if you didn't have good access to internet connections and how to utilize your phone and, I don't know, Zoom, the invention of the pandemic, really. How would you keep in touch with all the family members who can't necessarily visit you as frequently as before?
So as I mentioned before, having the internet access is one thing, but how to utilize it is another one, which is more important one. And unfortunately, uncomfortable with technology, many older older generations struggled and are still struggling to use modern tools to keep up with friends and family, especially in the time of the pandemic.
Right.
As life has increasingly moved online during the COVID, an older generation that grew up in an analog era is facing a digital divide. Often unfamiliar or uncomfortable with apps, gadgets, and the internet, many are struggling to keep up with friends and family through digital tools when some of them are craving those connections the most, right?
And if they can figure out their way around these apps and gadgets, it opens up a whole new world,
Of
right?
course.
I alluded to Zoom. That's an important one, isn't it?
Right. While teenagers are celebrating birthdays over Zoom with one another, children are chatting with their friends over online games, and young adults are ordering food via delivery apps. Some older people are intimidated by such technology because they don't know where to start and how to do it.
Right.
According to a 2017 Pew Research study, 3/4 of those older than 65 said they needed someone else to set up their electronic devices. A third also said they were only a little or not at all confident in their ability to use electronics and to navigate the web.
All you have to do, family members, is to sit down with the elders of the family and provide them directions a few times, and
Right.
they'll get it. They'll get it, right? You just need to, provide the right resources, maybe.
Right.
Not only the time during the pandemic, but just in our daily lives. If you think about how much tech has seeped into our day-to-day transactions, it's a lot. There are so many different gadgets, kiosks, which I'm not
Right.
a big fan of for a number
Me
of.
neither.
My credit card gets stuck in those machines so frequently. It drives me so crazy because we're
Right.
always running late to something and I just want to buy food and go.
Yeah.
And
And make
if-
it fast.
If it doesn't spit out my credit card,
Right.
how am I going to get my food and go?
I mean, kiosks are supposed to make it fast and quick, right?
Right? It's supposed to be efficient, time sensitive.
Yeah, I mean, I went to McDonald's recently and I was
Okay.
shocked by how they changed everything to order using a kiosk. Even I was struggling with the device that I
Really?
started to think about my grandparents, right? Like how will they use this technology and how
Right.
will they order the food
Right.
they want? And because there was actually no one there to guide me or help me through it.
Because every kiosk at every franchise, at every restaurant will look different.
Right.
And even if you're familiar, this is brand new territory, right? And no matter how much they try to simplify it, sometimes it's just not simple enough.
Exactly.
Maybe it's a design issue or a cost issue.
Right.
So wouldn't that be more difficult for those who are not tech savvy?
Of course.
Now, the uneasiness is driving away the elders from visiting these stores altogether, and that's really bad business,
I
isn't
know.
it?
So according to a digital competency survey conducted by the Seoul Digital Foundation for 5,000 Seoul citizens, only 45.8% had the experience of using a kiosk.
Okay.
As reason for not using the kiosk, they cited because they do not know how to use it or it's difficult, by about 34% giving that answer. About 30% of them saying because there is no need, and another 18% saying because I get pressured from people queuing behind me.
Instead of pressuring, help.
Right.
No, really. But then again, I go back to, are we all rushing to get
Yeah.
somewhere? Okay. Now, even if they tried, some of them had a hard time using it. So it's not like they're not trying.
Right. So in particular, 1 in every 5 elderly people was not able to solve problems when using those digital devices.
Okay.
Although the kiosk installation promotes convenience and time reduction, it did not apply the same when the elderly had difficulties using it.
Suddenly you're using more time.
Right.
The irony of that. Then how should we bridge this digital divide? We're aware of it. How do we fix it?
So the disparity in digital access stems from barriers in 3 areas, right? Availability, affordability, and adoption.
Right.
And to date, most efforts aimed at closing the gap have focused primarily on the first 2 categories, availability and affordability, and less so on the third, which is adoption. So also, although investments by government and private sector players to build out the requisite infrastructure and make internet service affordable are critical, the benefits will not be fully realized if households do not adopt and know how to use those devices, right?
We're an age society, aren't we not?
Right.
Shouldn't we be, targeting a really big demographic? So what can be done to bring up the adoption rate at this point?
So in order to bring up the adoption rate, especially in those older generations, the good news is that there is a powerful, proven tool for solving the adoption piece of the puzzle,
Really?
which are digital navigators or digital tutors.
Really?
Right?
That's kind of ironic because it's like saying you can't adopt this new tag. Let me introduce you to a digital tutor.
Right. I mean, like for when I think about my grandfather, he has me, like his granddaughter, to teach him how to use those devices, right? But then there are the elderlies who do not have such a support system.
Sure.
So using those digital navigators or digital tutors will be effective, right?
Right.
They are trained individuals, typically based in a community organization, who provide tailored support for the full spectrum of digital inclusion needs, from internet and device access to digital skill building.
Oh, I thought you meant by digital navigators, like it's like an online class.
Oh, no. The actual people who can sit next to you and tell you how to use it, right?
Okay, gotcha. Because I was like, then how would they get online to access a tutoring class?
Yeah, that's the different problem, right?
Let me clarify.
Right.
So these
The
digital
real
tutors
people.
come to you,
Right.
to the elderly, and teach you how to navigate cyberspace.
Yes.
The government is also pushing for a new policy called Digital Inclusive Society.
So the government has defined a society in which all citizens can participate in the digital world without discrimination or exclusion and enjoy the benefits equally as a digital inclusive society, and is promoting related policies.
I mean, it sounds great on paper, but I
Right.
do wonder what are the key points of this policy.
So the digital inclusion policy is being pursued in 4 major directions.
Okay.
First, the government plans to strengthen the digital capabilities of all citizens. A representative example is the Digital Learning Center project, which is related to the digital tutors. It operates in 1,000 locations across the country so that anyone can learn about that technology as much as they need.
Great classes.
Right. And second, creating an inclusive digital use environment. A typical example is a project that guarantees information accessibility so that even the most vulnerable can use it easily by making a user-friendly kiosk, web, or app in the first place, rather than making it so complicated.
You know, this would benefit all of us. A user-friendly kiosk.
Right.
Simplify.
Yeah, and the bus public Wi-Fi project is also part of the digital inclusion policy.
Okay, faster internet access on traveling buses.
Right.
And what about the third policy?
So the third, the government will promote the inclusive use of digital technology so that tech can be used to help us live well together and solve social problems. Lastly, to create a foundation for digital inclusion, the government is promoting the enactment of the Digital Inclusion Act and operating a digital inclusion forum with the public and the private sectors and trying to come up with a possible solution to solve the digital gap.
Isn't that just like nice and the right thing to do?
Of course.
No one left behind. It's sensible. And like we mentioned, if we're headed, in fact, to the no country for old men narrative, when society is heading towards an aging society,
Right.
it just doesn't add up. I'm telling
Exactly.
you, that's just bad business.
Right.
Thank you so much, Diane, for an insightful conversation. I feel like I'm part of the included list as well. Thank you. I'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
We have our sports stream segment with Danielle coming up next.